Hello everybody, this is Milosoft. So I took a little bit of a break from creating YouTube content. I wanted to get back into programming on the Commodore 64 and the Commodore PET. And to be honest, I ran out of ideas on software protection, and I really didn't know where to go with video content. I'm back, and I would like to first of all thank everybody for getting me up to 1,102 subscribers. As you can see from the screen, I've also been accepted into the monetization program, and I have now earned, well, in this time frame, $3.32. So I'm just about to be able to retire on my YouTube earnings. But seriously, I'd like to thank everybody for the numerous views, the numerous likes, the comments, watching the videos. It means a lot to me that people are embracing this type of video content. In today's video, we're going to take a look at the game Catacombs by Supersoft, which was written for the Commodore PET. Catacombs was made back in 1981 by a young gentleman named Brian Cotton. He created quite a few text adventure games back in the early 80s, and I really don't know what happened to him. I've done a little bit of research, tried to find out where he is today, and I just have come up empty. So this little page dedicated to Supersoft. We have one of their advertisements here. They were located in Middlesex, United Kingdom. And here's a series of advertisements from Supersoft. They released Super Glooper, which was a Pac-Man game, Asteroids, Giddy Ghouls, which seems to be a lost title, and Meteorites. Meteorites was a Missile Command clone written in machine language. Very cool. And they also put out The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Catacombs. And here's some more releases. Cosmic Aliens, Weird Wood, Cornucopia. Quite a few of these Supersoft titles have been lost. I don't know of ROM Invaders being around. Space Rescue. Space Debris is still available. Cosmic Aliens, I'm not sure. And here we have an advertisement from the winter of 1982. Catacombs was 27 British pounds. Occupying over 300 blocks on the disk, Catacombs is extremely difficult to solve. And it's almost impossible to cheat disk only. And then there's Goblin Towers, which was 14 British pounds. Dubbed a starter dungeon by the author, but Goblin Towers is far from easy. If you do succeed in the quest, you will have learnt many of the skills necessary to solve more complicated adventures such as Catacombs or Cornucopia. Discs are essential. And these titles have been remade. Catacombs, Witch Hunt, Cornucopia, Forestland, and Goblin Towers were made for the Commodore 64, 128, Amstrad, and IBM. They were originally written by Brian Cotton. Here's the PC version. Now, is it possible to find Catacombs? The original 1981 Commodore PET version of the game is largely considered lost. And we do a search for Catacombs. Nothing is found. If we do a search for Supersoft, here is Meteorites, which was written by D.E. Anthony. I'm thinking that's either Doug or Dave Anthony. I've spent quite a bit of time trying to find out who he was and where he is, and I've come up empty. Unfortunately, finding answers from the creator of Supersoft is going to be almost impossible now because Peter Calver, the founder of Supersoft, passed away I believe it was January of this year, 2026. I did correspond a little bit with Peter regarding some of the early Supersoft games, and he could only tell me that D.E. Anthony lived in the UK, but that's all I know. On this website, Solution Archive, it says the original Commodore PET version of this game is currently lost, but the later Classic Quest Revisited version was recovered from a collector in 2021. So again, the earliest version of this game for the Commodore PET is nowhere to be found. This is the Commodore PET CBM Enthusiasts page on Facebook. Here on Facebook, June the 9th of 2026, is a post from Colin Haynes. It reads, "In amongst a set of diskettes I have, there is an original Supersoft Catacombs text adventure disc and also an original Supersoft Goblin Towers disc. I do not believe that Catacombs has been archived anywhere, so I'd like to do that. I have a Tynemouth SD2PET device plugged into my 8032 as device 8 and have configured the 4040 to be device 9. The Goblin Towers diskette is copyable both to another diskette in a 4040, and also I can copy all the files to an SD card using CBM command." So this is the issue that Colin is facing. He has the original disk of Catacombs and the original Goblin Towers. The fact that both of them have survived for 45 years and are still readable would be very impressive. Here is a screenshot of Colin's disk. You can see it says Catacombs disk data, and we have what appears to be corrupted files. They are sequential files. That doesn't look like a proper disk listing. 315 blocks free. So we'll get into the comments here. David Duke, who created Rotor Rampage for the Commodore PET. Ian Barfett, "I'm guessing there is some corruption. I suggest you get a flux image of the disk with a grease weasel. After some thought, the Catacombs disk could be marked DOS 2 as it is old. Your 4040 may have a higher DOS version." And here's the latest update from Colin. "I have a Zoom floppy and an open CBM and the Find CBM Transfer Front End by Steve Gray." Hi Steve, I met you at World of Commodore. "I can copy files direct from my 4040 to my PC. However, it still doesn't cope with the files on the diskette, and when I create a D64 with CBM transfer, it only copies a few files. So it's still not coping with the weirdly named sequential files. I've tried to use the image copy, but it doesn't seem to be able to create a D64 file." So this is the issue that Colin is facing. He's able to make a copy of a disk on his 4040 disk drive from one drive to the other, that is, from drive 0 to drive 1. The issue is he's only able to get Goblin Towers onto his SD card where it becomes available in the real world. Catacombs, on the other hand, he's only able to get 3 files copied over. There's not enough of the program to be able to make a backup outside of on his Commodore drive. So he's able to make as many disk copies as he would like on his 4040, but he cannot put them onto his PC. And therein is the problem. So let's take a look at some of the comments. Let me just open up the comments here. Here is the original disk. Catacombs Supersoft 4040 format. It is indeed written for the 4040, but he's having issues with it. Now, some of the opinions here on the Facebook post were that the disk was using a custom loader. So if you remember going back to your Commodore 64, you loaded up an Electronic Arts game. There was usually a 2 or 3 block file named EA, and that was it. There were no further files on the disk. And if you typed load star, comma 8, comma 1, it would proceed to load the contents of the game into memory. That's because the game was tucked away on the track and sectors of the disk. And there was speculation that that's what was going on with this game here.
Hi there. Here's a bit of a backstory about how these discs, these games came to light. So the two in question are Goblin Towers and Catacombs that I've read about on the internet for the Commodore PET, but never actually seen a download. So it seemed like they were worth looking at and worth saving, if at all possible, for everybody else out there. About a year ago, I managed to win on eBay a bunch of discs, a whole load of discs with all sorts of interesting things, compilers, different versions of Pascal, New Forth, assembler stuff on there. Over here, we've got a whole bunch. We've got some VMM files for those of us like me that are lucky to have a bit of hardware that you can place onto the user port and play music files out on the Commodore PET. There's other things in there that you can see. Word Power VisiCalc, Macro. I'm not sure I've seen Macro out there. Maybe it is out there. There's other stuff in some of these files as well. Some more music files, some graphics programs, some educational games, that kind of stuff. But the ones that so I was using a product called CBM Commander. I'll just flip across to my Commodore PET and load CBM CMD80. Takes a little while to load, and it's a really useful program that allows you to have two disk device IDs running at the same time. As you can see on the left hand side, we've got device 8 on the left hand side, which is actually the TimeMath SD card board that I've got plugged in the back. And over here you can see at the bottom it says 9 semicolon 0, so that's drive device ID number 9, disk 0. And here's a bunch of ROM files that were also on one of the diskettes that I'll need to work my way through, because these are all clearly images of various ROMs that were collected by somebody else over a period of time. Now it's easy using this program to copy from, for example, from drive 9, which is a 3040 that I'll show you in a minute, over to the TimeMath board, get it on an SD card, and then that's it. There it can all be saved and shared around, then can be archived for everybody else to see. But I'm just going to take the ROM disk out, and I'll pop the Catacombs drive disk in the drive. If I quit out of here and load the files, a list of the files on the Catacombs disk, you can see, I'll just stop it there, that these are all in a slightly weird format with double quotes and single quotes and a lot of .seq files and that kind of stuff all over the place. Now, those are not copyable in CBM Commander. So the ones that just normal PRG files, and in fact normal .seq files, can be copied by CBM Commander. But there's something strange about what's going on here off this Supersoft diskette, that the program works and you know the game runs just fine. And in fact you can copy it using the normal disk copying commands on a Commodore PET to another diskette. That's easy, so I can have an archive copy myself, but actually trying to find a way of copying this so that other people could have it out there on the internet was beyond me. I'll just pause for a minute and I'll show you how I've connected the two devices onto the Commodore PET, because I've got an extra little bit of hardware in there that I'll show you. So I'll just pause this for a minute. Okay, so what we've got is the Tynemouth SD2 PET Future, which plugs in normally into the IEEE 488 port on the back of the PET. But also what I've got over here is my 3040. Now that would normally be device ID 8, but what you can do is change the device numbers by cutting those tracks that you can see, those 3 tracks in the middle there. I didn't really fancy cutting them permanently, so what I did was I popped a 40 pin socket underneath the 6532 and pulled out one of the pins that you can see there, and that's had the effect of making this 3040p device ID number 9. Now, problem is you've got to plug in the Tynemouth adapter, the Tynemouth memory card setup into the back of the Commodore PET, and also the disk drive at the same time. And there's no easy way of doing that if you haven't got some kind of adapter. So what I've got here, you can probably see in there from Sven Pettersson's GitHub, the files are available. He's created some files such that plugs into the IEEE 488 port. At the back, you can plug in a normal GPIB cable, but also if you put this riser on the top here, then you can also have plugged in a device ID number 8, which is the Tynemouth board as well. So I've got the Tynemouth board is device ID 8. I've got the 3040 configured over here with that pin pulled out to be device ID 9, and I've got them both plugged in at the same time by using the this little adapter board from Sven Pettersson's GitHub. Right, I'll plug this all back in and I'll show you the process of actually creating the file from the program that was supplied to me. Okay, so now I've got the Tynemouth SD2 PET plugged in as device ID 8, and I've got the my 3040 configured as device ID number 9 over there. So a point to note, just for anybody if they're looking at this sometime in the future, so that would normally list all the files on the Tynemouth board because it's plugged in and it's active on as device ID 8. Doesn't work, can't find it. If you've got this set up that like I have, what you need to do is turn the floppy disk drive on. You can hear it coming on in the background, and if I do that command again, so there's something about the Tynemouth board that doesn't get initialized properly until the floppy disk drive is turned on as well. So there you go, that's now working as device ID 8, device ID 9 on my right hand side. I popped this request out on Facebook probably a month or so ago about how on earth I could do this, and Marcel got in touch with me, and we've been through a few iterations of the program, but if we load the program now, D64 Maker is the latest version that I have. Okay, so the Catacombs disk is in drive 0. Program is loaded, and we'll run that. So we now have a choice here of source. Source is drive 9, so that's number 2 I press. It's in drive 0, I could put it in 0 or 1. The destination drive is drive 8, which is the Tynemouth board, and it's 0, and we'll call it Catacomb. And confirm all of that, pop a disk in the drive, and away we go. And you can see down the bottom there, it's detected the number of blocks and the number of sectors per track. It should be on the 4040, and it will go through them one block at a time. You can see it, the full stops working its way through. This takes on my machine somewhere around an hour to do a whole diskette, so I'm not going to subject you to that pain. And at the end of it, a new file is created at the end of it, and Marcel will walk you through, or has already walked you through, how he decodes that file and how it becomes something that he can share with everybody else. So I hope you enjoy the games. and I hope that's been of interest to those people who want to connect two different devices on the IEEE port as well, because it took me a while to sort that out. I will go through all these other discs over here, because I think there's some stuff in here that I've got that has never been archived for anybody else, and I'll get that stuff shared out there on the internet with you guys as time goes by.
Here.
Thanks very much.
So with Colin being faced with the very real possibility of not being able to share Catacombs with the world, what I did was I came up with a program that would help him back it up. PET disk to D64. So this program I wrote for Colin, specifically for him, and it's D64 Image Maker. It's designed to take a disk off the 4040 disk drive and create a file on the SD2 PET, which should be a functioning D64 image. It's pretty simple, written in BASIC, because you don't need machine language for something like this. In fact, I would say it's easier to create in BASIC than machine language. We get the source drive, which is in variable SD, device 8, 9, 10, or 11. And then we get the drive. Is it going to be drive 0 or drive 1? Because it's a dual drive. We then get the destination drive, 8, 9, 10, or 11. And is it drive 0 or drive 1? And then we go down here, we open a channel to device SD under channel 1. We send an initialization to the drive, and then we open a buffer using channel 2. And here we're opening on channel 3 the file name you'd like to save the disk as, P, W. So this creates a program. W means write, and we're going to write the contents of the disk to a file. Down here, we are going from tracks 1 to 35, and we're going to read them in using the U1 command. We're going to read in to buffer 2, track and sector, where T and S changes. We're going to check the error channel. ER will return any error. If ER equals 0, go down to 2058. It will make 5 tries to read a bad sector and then give up. And then we're going to set the buffer pointer to 0 to get the very first character on the sector. And this loop here does all the magic. For I equals 0 to 255, get number 2, comma A string. If A string equals 0, then if A string equals nothing, then A equals 0. And then we're going to write it to the file. Print number 3, character string A. So what we do is we go through all 35 tracks, we go through all of the sectors, and we run this for next loop, and we spit out all of that information into channel 3, where channel 3 is going to be right here, the file that we're writing to the SD card. And hopefully, in a perfect world, it will create a suitable dump. Here's the program in action. Device 8, source drive 0, destination drive 9, drive 0. We're going to call it image. Okay, yes. Insert disk into drive 0. And here's the program in action. Now, the reason I'm using a D80 disk is because we're taking the contents of basically a 1541 disk. We're taking a 4040 Commodore disk, which is identical to a 1541 disk, and we're creating a D64 from it. There's not enough room on a standard D64 to put a copy of itself. So in this case, I've created a D80, which is a larger disk format, and we're copying the contents of one disk onto another. The purpose of this is so that Colin can take his original Catacombs disk, put it in the 4040, and make a disk image of it on the SD to PET device, and hopefully get a working copy of the program. It's showing the tracks along the top, track 1 to track 35, and vertically we have sectors 0 to 20. This program is available on my itch page. There's no cost, it's free. Feel free to download it and use it to your heart's content. Here's how my interaction with Colin started. I emailed him and I said, "Hello, you have two of the most wanted pet games out there. I'm somewhat in shock you're willing to share them with the community. I've tried reaching out to you on Facebook, but you haven't responded. The disk is likely DOS 2 as per the 2A in the disk ID of the directory. The lack of files likely means the game itself is on the sectors of the disk and uses a loader to read them in. This is why the file copy method fails. Given your current issues, I'm thinking the best approach would be to run a program on the PET that will capture the contents of the disk and allow them to be put into a D64 image. I believe I can whip up such a file if you're interested." Colin writes back, "Hi there, thanks for getting in touch. And thanks in particular for all the new pet games you've made that I have enjoyed." Well, you're welcome, Colin. Thank you. "They are very much appreciated here and I've enjoyed lots of them. On my list of things to do soon is take a deep breath and view your 6502 coding tutorials so I can do more with my pets." Well, that's a great project. "Sorry I've not replied on Facebook. I don't much like Facebook really, except it's useful for specific groups like the one I posted on, but that means I don't actually go on there often." And he's right. Facebook is basically a trash bin. I don't like to use it either. In terms of Goblin Towers and Catacombs, I have sent copies of the discs to Dave Duke for him to take a look at. I would, however, be very interested in a program that, I guess, does a sector copy into a D64. If it helps, I'm happy to send you copies of the discs that I can make on my 4040 so you can have the actual discs yourself to work with. Thanks very much for your offer of help, and thanks again for what you do for the community." Now, I use an emulator. I do not have a real Commodore PET. I do not have a Commodore disk drive. All of my programming is done in Vice or CCS64. So even if Colin was to send me the original discs, I wouldn't be able to do anything with them, and I would be in the same predicament as him. Now, I'm not suggesting that the only reason Catacombs has made it out into the internet is because of my program. I'm sure that over time, Colin could have acquired the hardware necessary or found a person with the hardware to be able to make a copy of the disk image. I'm not for a moment suggesting that the only reason it's out there is because of this program. But we were able to expedite the process and get it done before Colin left on holidays for a week. So as it stands, he is currently away, and I have a copy of his disk image, and that's going to allow me a little bit of time to prepare it so that when he gets back, it will be ready for release. What you see on the screen now is basically the start of the process. He says, "Apologies, I had a problem with drive 0, which needed fixing. I copied both the files to the Tynemouth SD card, and I'm running it now." By it, he means the program that I created for him. "It will take a while by the looks of things." And yes, it was quite slow. I had to swap source and destination around as source is 9 and destination drive is 8, but it's documenting fine enough, so no problem. I'll let you know. And the next message from him says, "Finished after about an hour and a quarter." Wow, I had no idea it would be so long. So it took an hour and 15 minutes. It reported 683 blocks written to disk. The first photo attached shows the before and after of files on the SD card. The file SD to PET D64 has the same file size and the same date timestamp and compares with 0 errors to the file you sent me. So I don't believe that was touched. The second photo attached shows what the files you sent me look like. Here is an image, and you can see the file sd2pet.d64. That is the disk image that is now on Colin's SD2PET containing a backup copy of Catacombs. The question is, can we get it to work? And I respond, so it worked, but the image seems corrupted. The file names are garbage. I'm looking into it now. The disk has just 3 files on it, right? And this is where we get into some of the discussion that took place on Facebook. We had spoken about the possibility that after 45 years, the disks were corrupted. One of the final messages from Colin before he left on holidays was, if it works, you're going to have to bear with me as I go on holiday tomorrow for a week. And he attached a copy of diskimage.s00. So it was all or nothing. Either he would be gone for a week and I'd have no success, or he'd be gone for a week and when he got back, there would be great success. As of this moment in the video, I don't know if the game has been successfully recovered. What I do know is I have been able to get it to boot up. And now we're going to dig into that process. When I load the Catacombs disk into DIR Master, we can see a couple of things. First of all, there are files on the disk. There are several rooms, there are pictures, objects, indexes, rules, score, info, help, password, save. So what we thought was actually garbage on the Commodore PET screenshot turns out to be actually valid file names. Why are they corrupted? Well, they're not actually corrupted, and the game is not using a loader. So that ends the speculation that perhaps it was a track and sector loader. And the reason that Colin wasn't able to copy them, and the reason they looked garbled, is because they begin with double quotation marks. So because they begin with double quotes, it's turning on quote mode. Quote mode is when you type a quotation mark and it gives you the actual characters instead of the cursor movements. If I print clear screen, it actually prints the clear screen character. If I am not in quote mode and I press clear screen, then the screen is cleared right away. So what the directory is doing is it's turning on quotation mode, and I'm not sure what the C character is, the reverse C, I don't know. But that is the issue. That is why the disk directory is not visible. And it's also the reason why it's not copyable using the means that Colin is using. I'm going to clean up the disk directory. I've now finished renaming all of the files, and we're going to see how the disk directory looks now. Oh, we have one little bug, but the rest of the files are all listable. So I have to fix the third file, which matches the original PET screenshot. Description, okay, so save it. There, we have the disk restored. I'm not sure if all of the files are going to be intact or if they're corrupt. I'm hoping that they're all there, but you can see that the sequential files have not suffered any corruption. Can we load the game in? Let's find out. Load star, comma 8, comma 8, run, loading Catacomb now. Going to speed it up a little bit. Catacombs. And the game is working. North, south, you're at a church. Look, inventory, help. So I'm just going to recap what's taken place so far. Colin was able to dump a copy of his disk from the 4040 to a disk image and send the disk image to me. Now, at this point, the game is done. It's ready to be released. He was able to save it successfully. Looking at the disk directory, is there corruption on the disk? Well, in order to answer that question, what I'm going to do is load dir master. Now, if you take a look at the top left of the screen, there are two columns. Let me just enlarge it here for you. On the left is the original disk. The file names have invalid characters in them. They start with a double quotation mark, which is not correct, an @ sign, and a C. So there's a 0 and a 3 byte in most of the sequential files in the game. That is what was causing the disk directory to be garbled. I thought that it was corruption, but it's not. This is what Brian Cotton, the author of the game, intended. I'm not thinking that this was copy protection because the disk can be copied easily. It's just file copy that fails. What I'm thinking is that he wanted to keep people out of his code to keep the game difficult to play, difficult to solve. In order to make this into a readable directory, I've gone through and I've erased painstakingly these 3 invalid characters. Save you from having to watch it and just show you the final disk. Catacombs fixed. Now if I go in and I load that, you will see the proper disk directory. Now the disk is readable. We have several room files for the game. We have pictures, verbs, objects, rules, score, info, help. There are in fact 2 files on the disk with the name b4.ts. They begin with 3 different sets of characters. The first one begins with 3 asterisks, and the second one is an @ and a p. Again, I believe that Brian Cotton was trying to prevent people from being able to look at his code. If I load b4.ts, wanting to get a look at the 61 block file, I end up with instead, this is not the program, you've got the wrong one, Bluey. Now fixing this is very simple. I'm just going to delete the first b4.ts. I'm going to go down and change the file name so it's proper, b4.ts. So this disk is now 100% proper and readable, but it's not going to run. The reason for that being we've changed the file names. It's expecting a set of file names A. We've given it a set of file names B. So let me just show you. We have a single file, b4.ts, but since I've changed the file names, is the game going to load? I'm going to say no. Run, loading Catacomb now. File not found, error in 3. This is the loader file, the very first file on the disk. I'm going to run it, and then I'm going to call the SYS 655, which is what it calls in line 3. Searching for 0:@ p b4.ts. The loader file of Catacombs is looking for the invalid file name. When I say invalid, I just mean that it has characters that make the directory listing corrupted. It's not actually invalid because the author made it that way, but we want to clean the disk up and make it presentable and able to be file copied. So we need to fix this loader program so that it loads in the proper file. And having said that, let's just have a look at the basic file that Brian wrote 45 years ago. List. Here's Catacombs. All right, let's go back to the loader file. And I'm going to put an end so that it doesn't load the file. I'm going to type run. And then we're going to take a look at the memory locations. It reads L and H, where L is low, H is high. It's reading the start and the end addresses of where the data should go. So it's putting it at 634 all the way up until 710. For I equals L to H, it could be for I equals 634 to 710, but the author chose to put the L and H values. And it reads it, read DT, poke I comma DT. It's taking each of these values here and poking it starting at 634 up until 710. Knowing that SYS 655 calls the load, let's take a look in memory and see what that code does. We'll disassemble at 028F. At 028F, we load the accumulator with 27A, we put it in D1, we take 85, put it in DA, we take 2 and put it in DB. So I'm thinking that location DA and DB, because they're consecutive, are going to be a pointer to the file name. In other words, 0285 is going to hold the file name. And if we look at memory, we see 0 colon quote at pb4.ts. As for 27A, if we look at memory address 27A, it has a 10, a 0A, which is a value of 10. So here's what it's doing. It's setting the file name length of 10 characters, setting the low byte, and setting the high byte. 08, I'm just assuming is the device, drive 8. I'm not really familiar with the Commodore PET kernel, but we found the file name, and now we're going to change it. If we look at the data statements, we see the 10, which is the length of the file name. We want to change the 10 to a 7, because that's the length of the file name. This is the 0. 58 is the PETSCII for colon. 34 is the quote. We're going to get rid of the quote, the at, and the P. So we're taking out 3 values, but we want to put those 3 values back because there's machine code in lines 7, 8, and 9, and we don't want to change where it is in memory. So for every data statement we take out, we're putting one back. And then we have a second address, 48, 58, 34. So there are 2 file names in memory. Again, I'm going to take out the quote, the at, and the P, and then I'm going to put in 3 values to replace it. Clear the screen, rerun it. Now we're going to go into the machine language monitor. If we take a look in memory location 27A, it is a 7, so we have a 7 length file name. And at 0285, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Perfect. And the second file name was at location 27B. 0:b2.ts. I don't think there's a b2.ts on the disk, but just in case it's maybe a saved game or something that's called later, I'm going to keep that in there. We've gone into the loader file. We've changed the length of the file name down to 7 characters to get rid of the quote at p because we've renamed all the files. We replaced null those characters with null values. Just because this machine code here, if we take something out above, it's going to push the machine code up higher in memory, and we want it to stay where it is, just in case it's used elsewhere. I'm going to save it. I'm not very particular when it comes to file names. I just named it A. I'm having difficulty with quotes and colons and stuff because I'm so used to using CCS, and Vice is a little bit different. So it's not that I don't know how to type, it's that I don't know how to type using Vice. Okay, everything looks good. Let's run SYS655, searching for 0:b4.ts. It should work. Loading. Catacombs. Now, we have solved the problem of the main file, but all of those rooms, all of those sequential files are also being called in the game. And you see we now have a bad subscript error in 284, which is most likely a sequential file which has not been able to be found on the disk. Okay, so we have solved one problem. We've removed all of the garbage from the directory. We have a proper loader file now. We can load the basic file in. I'm going to scratch. I'm going to load A back in. And I'm going to save. So I'm going to replace the old loader with the new loader. And we're going to reload just to make sure it's the first file on the disk. Run. We're able to load the program in with our new file names, but the issue is, of course, the sequential files. And for that, we're going to have to investigate how the basic works. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of a heads up. It's a little bit tricky. Brian really didn't want you to look at his code. That's all I'm going to say. And we're going to get into that next. Before we get into looking at the basic program, I just want to take a look at something in the loader file. You'll notice it says open 5,8,5 password, S. There is no password file on the disk that's a sequential file, just a program file. And it does an input number 5, A, B, and then pokes A, B. So if there was a sequential password file on the disk, and let's say, for example, the two values in the file were 3 and 8, then it would poke 3, 8. Since SYS655 loads and runs the main file, I can't see any possible use for this code here. I think it's just meant to throw you off. And again, going back to 1981, this is pretty clever. Now, I have already examined b4.ts, which is the actual game engine. And I can tell you that, well, let's just have a look at it first. Let me just show you what I'm talking about. We want to find out where it loads sequential files. We know that there are pick files on the disk. Pick 1, pick 2, pick 3, 4, 5, 6. So it puts a value into TT string when it's time to show a picture, and then it goes to 188. which does a go sub to 314. And that opens 5, 8, 5 Z string plus TT string. So if TT string is the name of the file, then I'm thinking Z string is the garbage that's put before the file name. Let's just go a little bit further and see if we can confirm that. In line 280 and line 282, we're opening two sequential files, objects and verbs, both of which we know had 3 characters before it that were meant to obscure the directory. So Z string has to be the string that we're looking for. Now I already have gone through the program with a text editor and I've searched for where $$ is defined, and I'm telling you it's not in this program. So we have two options. Option 1 is remove all of the Z string from the basic program. Option 2 is find out where it's defined because it's bugging me. Well, I've already done that, and I'm going to share with you my results. If you look at the first 2 lines of the basic program, 1 SYS 15602. So I'm going to go into the machine language monitor. I just want to make sure it's visible to you. And we're going to take a look at 3CF2. 3CF2 is where some of the magic happens. We're setting DB into location 0, and we're loading location 1 with 3C, and then we're loading location BB with 25, and loading BC with 4. So this is 0-page addressing. I've covered it in my other videos. 0-page addressing is where you take 2 locations consecutive, such as 0, 1, 2, 3, 11, 12, 7, 8, doesn't matter, as long as they're in 0-page, and you put 2 values in them in the low and high byte order. So for example, in location 0 we have D8, in location 1 we have 3C. So that works out to 3CDB when we refer to location 0, because we read it backwards. So the low byte is DB and the high byte is 3C. 3CDB is being copied into 0425. 0425, of course, is going to be around the start of BASIC. So if we take a look at 0425, it happens to be a series of colons, and we saw that in line 2 of the BASIC program. Let me just have a quick glance here. Okay, you see these colons? Something is being put over top of it. So let's see what is at 3CDB that is so important. 3CDB, if we look in the hex area, we see Z string something, which I'm betting is an equal sign, quote 0 colon, and then I'm going to say that's character string 34, which is a quote 0 and a 3. Yeah, I think we found it. Let's just put that to the test. I'm going to 3DOF, just do an RTS. List 1 to 2. Now I'm going to SYS 15602, list 1 to 2. There it is. Z string equals 0, character string 3403, SYS 15449. Would you like to make a bet that 15449 changes the line back? Let's see here. Yep. So this is what it's doing. When we call the program, line 1 does the SYS 15602, which puts Z string equals into line 2. After that's been defined, it calls the SYS 15449, which puts the colons back. So if you break into the program and list it, you're not going to find where Z string is defined. And think about it, this was way back in 1981. This is pretty ingenious. So what we have to do is patch the program because we don't want Z string to be anything. We have nothing in front of our file names now. So let's load the program back in. b4.ts. I want to get it in an untouched state. Now there's something to consider, which is the machine code at the end of the file. If we make changes to the basic, it could change the end of basic pointers, which means that the machine code gets lost. So I want to just pay attention to that as well. So we're going to look at 3CDB. And I think the easiest thing to do is we're just going to put a quote right there. So it's position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we need to put a quotation mark at 3CDF. Fill 3CDF, 3CDF with 22. And I'll show you what I'm doing. Let's have a look here. 3. So I've changed Z string equals quote quote. That is what it has become. Now, the rest of this stuff is going to cause a syntax error. So we need to change this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Actually, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We only need to copy 5 bytes. Z string equals quote quote. That's 5 bytes exactly. So in line 3D09, we're going to change it to a 5. This is getting pretty complex. This is a lot of work for just one game. And I think there was one other spot, 3CDB. 3C68. 3C68. This is where it is just putting 3A, which I'm not even sure what 3A is. I want to say it's the colon, but I'm not sure. Anyway, we only need to do 5. Now, I'm hoping that we've done it right. I say we, but I guess I'm the one that's done all the work. We're going to scratch the old one. b4.ts, 8. So just to go over it again, the first line, put z string equals in line 2, and this SYS at 15449, put everything back to colons. When BASIC ran line 2, it defined z string, so it's okay to overwrite it. It's already in memory. All right, the final test. Check the directory, make sure all of the files have been converted. Looks good. Picture files are there, b4.ts. Perfect. Load the first file on the disk, run it. Loading Catacomb now. Okay, the main program has loaded. Will the sequential files work? Yes. Okay. North, you can't go that way. South. Okay. Look. Kill. I have no idea. Press space to end. All right, we have successfully gotten Catacombs to work. Not that it was ever broken in the first place, but we've removed all of the junk. The directory is working, the game is working, and thanks to Colin, this game will now see the light of day. This is Milosoft. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and thank you to Colin for sharing these gems with the Commodore community.